SEL most consultant on this project, and I'm working with Nathan Beck. And we actually got funding through New York Life Foundation to work with Expand Ed schools and Every Hour Counts. And through that partnership, we were able to invite Jacques Noisette to join us for this presentation. So I'm really excited to invite him to, kind of lead this 2 hours with us. So I want to give you a little information. For the past 15 years, Jacques has served in various capacities within the nonprofit sector. He's combined the skill of education management and program logistics to help uplift the quality of programming within various communities. Jacques has also published a children's book entitled Smarty Charlie, which illustrates growth mindset principles to help youth achieve endless possibilities. Jacques is currently the director of SEL at Expand Ed Schools, where he provides coaching support for schools looking to implement and strengthen their social emotional learning practices within New York City and with their national partners. And right now, through this project, Most Madison is a national partner. So thanks for joining us, Jacques, and take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Susan, for that nice, warm welcome. I appreciate that. My name is Jacques Noisette, and this is a picture of me hanging out by a tree. So we have me just smiling there, and I work with Expand Ed Schools as Director of Social Emotional Learning. As stated before, I've been doing nonprofit CBO work for over 15 years, in school, out of school time, and supported youth development. Been a multi-site director, managing multiple after-school programs. Also did a lot of project management and helping with the implementation of SEL at certain sites. Expand Ed Schools has an intermediary in New York City. Our job and our focus is to help the school day and the extended day align and support each other, work collaboratively, and have a strong messaging behind academics and also social emotional learning. So when we work with schools, this is what we're supporting. We're supporting a strong partnership and collaborative learning as a team. All right. So what I want to do is first and foremost is to kind of get to know you all in the room and introduce yourselves, but also answering this question, I will answer first. If you can teleport or teletransport to another place and time, where would you go and why? And then introduce yourself by your name and your role, and share your answer with the group. So for myself, I love hanging out with my family, and I love going on family trips and vacations. I wasn't able to do a whole lot of that this past summer, but what I do love to do is to go whitewater rafting. That's a love that I have, and if I can go to a nice high category 4 or 5, that's great for me. But we just took our kids whitewater rafting for the first time, and they loved it. So what I would do is kind of go back in time to 2 years ago. We first introduced it to the kids and had a nice trip on the lake, enjoying ourselves, hopping out of the raft, enjoying the rapids, and enjoying close family time together. All right. So if you can we could do it either one or two ways. We could have anyone just kind of randomly just to share out, or we could have one person start and then introduce the next person to start. What would you prefer? All right, so we'll just all just kind of randomly just hop on this and then just give your responses then.
Okay, I'll go. My name is Howard Hayes. Let me see here. I work at Goodman, and just out of curiosity, is everybody's thing kind of reverb? No. But does it sound normal with you? It sounds fine?
Yeah, it's echoey.
If Carrie, you mute, there won't be echo.
Okay. That does, okay.
Yeah, that sounds better.
No, that's okay. My role here is I do male programming, which is basically the male equivalent of Girls Inc. I specifically work with middle schoolers, and where would I go and why? Actually, I would probably go to Barcelona. I haven't left the country. I mean, I've left the country, but most of the places I've gone to was like Jamaica or the Bahamas or more vacation spots. Barcelona was probably the first place outside of the country that I went to, that even though it's a tourist destination, it is not as touristy. It kind of functions as its own city and doesn't really cater very much to um, to tourists. And well, I didn't feel that way. And I went there to go visit a friend who's a musician, artist, and since then I've read, seen, and like a couple things with different jazz artists. And I remember Miles Davis once said like it was one of the freest he's ever felt was when he was Spain, when he was in Spain. And I have to agree with him. I kept asking questions, trying to compare it to the United States, and it was just such a different approach to life that I came back feeling much more whole than I did when I left. And
Wow.
if I could feel that way regularly, I would. So I would say I would go to Spain in 2004, because that's when I was there before. So that's where
Thanks for sharing, Howard. That sounds great. Awesome.
and I'm gonna look at the screen, and I know you said we're just gonna go who's next. I see Gayleen with them shirts in the back, with that background. I see that background, and I had to say it looks
Thank
great.
you, Howard.
I wish I had a thought of doing something. So how about if I pass it to Gayleen?
All right. Can't hear you, Gayleen.
Okay, a place I would like to be. Well, I have never really traveled anywhere, but here to Wisconsin. I'm from Chicago, and I enjoy the kitchen. Being around in Wisconsin, I've been in a lot of kitchens and stuff, and every time I go in a kitchen, especially commercial, I wish I had it at home, because I find my days of feeling happy and content is cooking for others, and I enjoy it. I like gardening. You know, I like food from the garden or things that grow from the ground and make it delicious, where people can learn how to eat different foods, every culture. And my favorite is Mexican food. I talk to my sister a lot, and she's like, do Wisconsin have any other kind of food besides Mexican food? Because that's all I cook. I'm like, no, sister, it's just that I love it, you know? So I have Mexican neighbors, and they share their recipes with me and their food with me. So I don't have to go into another state or another country to enjoy diversity and culture. I enjoy it here in Wisconsin. And again, my favorite place is in the kitchen and sharing food with the neighbors in my community, the children in my community, and then also here at Goodman's Community Center, which I am an educator here. I've been the culinary instructor here for teens work, and because of COVID, I haven't been in a kitchen, and it's like tearing me apart. So I'm at home in my own kitchen, rattling and doing things. I know my neighbors are like, "What is she doing?" Because I would start at 6 a.m. to like 4 p.m. and it's like a shift for me. You know, I got blenders going, I got peppers boiling, I got chopping going on, and jalapenos everywhere. I just love the colors of food: green, red, white, yellow. It's like art to me. So
Excellent.
that's what I like the most.
Well, it's your favorite place for a reason, right?
My favorite
So you're gonna
place.
pass it off to. Now, just in the interest of time, if you could just state where you want to be teleported to, and a little bit of background for about 1 or 2 minutes. We can get to everyone.
Okay, so I'm gonna go now to Ben.
Ben.
Hi, my name is Ben. I am the club coordinator at Goodman. Where would I want to go? I would have to say probably back to New Mexico. I went there 5, 6 years ago. We went on top of a mountain there. It was really like you could see the whole city, and it was like cold up there, but warm down on the ground. So it was just like a really cool feeling. Like you felt very out of place, but it was a different experience, but I liked it a lot. So that's probably where I would choose to go. I'll pass it off to Vanessa.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Vanessa. I'm the past member at Goodman Center. Where would I would like to go back to, it was last year, 2019, summer 2019, when I went on a 1-week road trip with a few of my closest friends, and we went to Yellowstone and the Tetons, Grand Tetons, and it was great. So yeah, just like to spend a bit more time with them, but now we're scattered across the US because we graduated. So, it happens, but yeah. And I will pass it on to, let's see, Allison.
All right. My name is Allison Ward. I am also here at Goodman. I'm our college and career exploration coordinator. And I would like to go back, actually, probably like 20 years, and travel back to the Netherlands with my grandparents to see the farm that they immigrated from. Let me pull up names. I'll pick somebody. How about Mary?
Morning, everybody. Mary O'Donnell with the City of Madison Community Development Division. And boy, I just joined the call, so I haven't had a lot of time to think about this. I spent a year in Denmark. I would go back there. And I will pass to, I don't know who hasn't gone, but how about Hugh?
Thank you, Mary. Like you, I just joined the group. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Wow, tele-transport myself to another place. Name's Hugh Wing. Work for the City of Madison. If I could go somewhere else back in time, yeah, where would I go? When would I go?
Just to be clear, it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be in the past. It could be in the future as well. Anytime you can.
Oh. No, I'm quite happy where we are, right? I think, yeah. No, I'm okay where we are. I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be. Sorry, guys.
All right, who will you pass it to?
Just like Mary just joined, don't know who's been. So the first face I see and recognize, Bree, you're on next.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Sorry, my internet's been really spotty with so many people, so I'm going to keep my video off, but no, I am here and very present. So my name is Bree McPhee-Lyon. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships with the Madison School District. Great to see all of you, and a place I would go or wish I could go would actually be Guyana in South America. My mom's Guyanese, and I've never been to her home country, and I would love to see it, but I'd want to go back in like into the 60s when she would have been in her 20s, so I could really experience it with her and through her eyes when she was a young adult as well. And I don't think, Becca, you haven't gone, right? Okay, thanks everyone.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my mic has been bad. I'm Becca. I'm the elementary program coordinator at Bayview Foundation, and I would go to Hawaii pre-colonization and like carbon footprint and everything, so that I could snorkel and scuba dive and see the fishies and the coral.
Nice.
And I will pass to, oh my goodness, Nate Shore.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nate Shore with Baby Foundation Community Programs Manager. As far as a time, I would go to the end of December. First reason being that it would be post November 3rd for a number of reasons. And then my wife and I are closing on a house on December 29th. So, and
Congratulations.
feels it's our first house, so it feels very, very far away, even though it's only like 2 months, but it feels very far away. So, so I guess in Madison, post November 3rd, specifically December 29th. So I'm going to pass it to Nathan Beck.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nathan Beck. I'm the Madison Out of School Time Coordinator. And if I could go anywhere, we were supposed to go to Cuba for Thanksgiving this year. We were going to take our toddler, and we've never really done things like that. And we had this realization that our toddler is going to be in school someday, and it's going to be harder to take trips. So we mapped out a lot of fun trips over the next couple of years. Obviously, not happening at this point, but so I would go to Cuba. In late November is where I would transport. I will pass it to Alejandra.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alejandra. I'm the Assistant Director of Youth Programs at the Goodman Community Center. I'm kind of torn. I would go back to when I was 10 years old, and there was a family trip that we took to Mexico, and it was the first and only time my mom and all of her siblings and all of their children were together in my grandma's house. And so both my parents have 14 siblings. And so I have like over 80 first cousins. And so just on my mom's, or not just on my mom's side, but imagine all of us in my grandma's house. And there's a picture of me and all of my cousins like on top of my grandma basically. And I didn't know how special of a time it was when I was a kid, because it never happened again. And my grandma passed away shortly after that. So I would definitely go back to that. And outside of like my own lived experiences, I would definitely go to my parents' hometown pre-colonization just to see what it was like. And I think something that anyone who has experienced diaspora knows that it's hard to feel like you understand and know your roots, especially when there's things like colonization happening in your country. So I think that would be really special to see. But I will pass it to Gabby.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gabrielle. I am the director at the Middleton Youth Center. And I think, just I guess staying with my own life, I would go back to Brazil in 2019. My husband is half Brazilian, so half of his family is there, including his sister and her partner. And in 2019, we took a trip there with his parents, and my parents came for the first time. So it was just like both sides of the family all together, experiencing that part of his life and meeting that part of his family. And it was really amazing. And we were supposed to go this August again, and obviously couldn't. So it would be great to see all those people again. And who hasn't gone? Susan, you haven't gone.
Well, hi again. I'm Susan. I'm going to the future. I'm out of here. Let's go to like 2050. Let's envision a, like a much different fixed, like let's fix the fixedness, right? And we're living in a totally different place. I'm feeling speculative fiction right now. Been listening to some Octavia Butler, and I'm just going with, let's come on, let's bring it. Yeah, right. I will be, and I'd love to be this age then, because if I really go back, if I go to 2050, I'm going to be like 83. I need this energy, maybe even my 20-year-old energy. Let's bring that and go there. So yeah, thank you for asking and getting us thinking about all these great things. And so let's call Hillary Davis. I don't think we've heard from you, Hillary.
so also, if you hear a lot of noise, they're like tearing down a tree right outside my apartment. So sorry. But I'm the past AmeriCorps member serving with the Middleton Youth Center. And I would also travel into the future. I used to live in San Diego, and I was supposed to visit some friends this past May, but I obviously couldn't do that. So hopefully at least sometime in the near future, I'll be able to do that. So I don't think Bonnie has gone.
No, I haven't. Thanks, Hillary. My name is Bonnie Erickson. I'm the coordinator with the Pass AmeriCorps program. So shout out to the Pass AmeriCorps members on the call, Hillary and Vanessa. And if I could travel, I don't need to travel through time, but I would travel through space today. It's my dad's 70th birthday. So if I could teletransport to be up in northern Wisconsin to celebrate with him today, I would definitely do that. But we're going to try Google Meeting tonight. So we'll see how it goes, trying to get my siblings on that call and my dad on a Google Meeting. So wish us luck. And I will pass it to Francisco. I don't know if you've gone already.
Hey, no, I have not. So if I could go anywhere to any place and time, I would I'd go to another intergalactic universe, you know, just to see if there's any other life forms there, you know, say what's up to them, see what's popping. Yeah, and the time would obviously be the present moment. That's the only thing that's real. There is no time. And yeah, I work here at Goodman. I'm the entrepreneurship and music instructor here. Yeah, great being on this call.
Excellent. Are you the last one?
I haven't gone yet. I'm
Okay.
Carrie. I'm sorry. I have my screen off for a while because I'm trying to use my phone because I don't have headphones for my computer. So I'm here, but I'll probably turn my camera off most of the time. I work for Goodman. I support all the teen programs here in a bunch of different ways. If I could go anywhere, I think I would go. I lived in Ireland for a little while right after college when I was kind of trying to figure out what to do with myself. And all I owned was like a suitcase and a bike. And it was just a really free time and really explorative. And I feel like this time kind of echoes that in some weird ways, even though I'm much more rooted with work that I love and family here and community. But it feels like everything's possible somehow in this also very scary time. So it's weirdly echoing that time in my life. So I'm thinking about that a lot lately. Yeah, I'm happy to be on the call. Oh, is Arthur? Yeah, so I also can't see who's all on there. So I'm sorry, I have no idea who is left or who, yeah, I can't see everybody.
Yeah, I'll take it, Carrie. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
All right. This is Arthur Morgan. I'm the middle school manager here at this beautiful Goodman Community Center. If I could go anywhere, I see that I can pick a place or a time. I would go back to when I was 9, which was not that long ago. Chicago, hang out with my grandmother, who passed pretty like right before I turned 10. With everything that's going on right now in the world, I got a lot of questions, and that's who I would ask, and just to ask her how I'm supposed to navigate, you know, everything that's going on right now, how I'm supposed to handle with these kids, because that's who guides me and has guided me for almost 30 years working for young people. So that's what I would do. I would go back in time and like just listen, just sit and just listen. Let me think. Who is that? Everyone?
I think Andrew hasn't gone, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Past Andrew.
I am the last. Thanks, Arthur. So my name is Andy Davey, and I work for Madison Community Foundation. And I'm going to piggyback off both Gayleen and Nate. So I love to cook like Gayleen, and like Nate, just closed on a new house and in the process of moving in. So things are kind of a mess. So I'm going to transport to the future where we're fully moved in, and COVID is over, and we can actually have friends and family over. And we bought a house specifically with a kitchen that opens up to the living room, so I can cook and hang out and socialize with everybody. So that's my dream right now. Thanks, everyone. Good to be here.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Andrew. And thank you for everyone sharing all their responses. Very creative. Some are going to the future, to 2050. Some are just going for next year. A lot of family responses, which is awesome to hear from. Is it going back to visit grandmothers and getting guidance, getting support from family, or just going on family trips. And I think that's I think we all have to have that mental assent, that mindfulness kind of response to how overwhelming the space is right now with what's going on in Philadelphia, with what's going on with the elections, with what's going on in the world. For me, it can be very overwhelming, even me as a dad and as an employee, to juggle, my job and also to juggle my kids' studies. And that's a serious undertaking. It's more overwhelming than I thought it was going to be, and trying to juggle everything, trying to make it work. So going to that space and keeping myself positive and keeping myself grounded does help me deal with a lot of the overwhelmingness of the time. We all kind of deal with it in our own ways, but I like to kind of Star Trek-y my way to a different space and time and experience a good feeling behind that. All right, so we're gonna do, we had our intros. Just really quickly, we're gonna just think about and talk about what words come to mind when you hear the word educational equity. We're not gonna have people just kind of chime out video. We could just kind of share that on the chat. And some words that come to mind when you think of educational equity, whether it be fairness, whatever it may be. I just want to get an idea of what your thoughts are on the topic before we begin. So feel free to share and chime in on the chat. See any responses? Okay, we have potential and hope. Excellent. Everyone gets what they need to learn. Celebration of difference. After school and identity focused work. No gaps in achievement. Meeting students where they are. Excellent. These are really good responses. Everyone is a learner and everyone is a teacher. That's awesome. That's great. No gaps in opportunities. All learning styles are used. That is awesome. We need that. Freedom. It's a powerful one word right there, freedom. All right. Flexibility and creativity rather than standardization and rigidity. That's powerful in itself. And I think these are all great responses and these are great answers, and equal opportunity. And I think we all have our ideas, and there is a huge bucket when we do discuss equity and what it means. I think all of these responses fit in that bucket. I'm gonna go to the definition for the National Equity Project and how they define it. Pretty much what everyone was basically stating, and just kind of summarizing that into educational equity means that each child receives what they need to develop to their full academic and social potential. So that's what we mean by equity. And we're going to see how SEL leverages this for our students and seeing how we can all support our students in achieving their fullest potential. They have the resources, the materials, the type of instruction and approach necessary for them to reach their highest potential. That's where we come in. All right, so in looking at our agenda, we started with our icebreaker and our warm up, and we're gonna go into an SEL and equity outline using the Castle model. And we talk about how did we get here, looking at the history of education and seeing where we started and where we are now and how history affects our current situation and our present. I'm gonna go into my SEL story. Cultural affirmation, go for a 10-minute break. And just so you guys know, when I facilitate, I do like to talk, but I do like to hear a lot of feedback from those who are on, who are attending. And just, I think that has like a mantra of our organization is that the answer is in the room. And it's because everyone brings a type of resource or knowledge base to these kind of conversations. And we do feel that has a great asset to our conversations. So looking at that and hoping that everyone kind of chimes in and participates in the discussions. After the break, we're going to talk about empathy versus implicit bias. And that is a huge hindrance to achieving equity, is implicit bias, and how do we overcome that, how do we counteract that, and looking at some strategies around that. Elevating youth voice and agency, and then I'd like to carve out time for just some planning. So as we're learning, as we're discussing, and there are any takeaways, we're going to set some time apart for just to, how are we going to use this when we get back to our schools or our spaces? How are we going to instruct differently? How are we going to support our staff differently when it comes to these types of topics? Okay, then we have like a quick Q&A. All right, so just going over some group norms, what we agreed to. This is a hot button topic. It can be somewhat intense, but I just want to just create some norms around this and make sure we agree upon this as well. And we agreed to creating an equitable and just work environment involves surfacing and discussing experiences that can be hurtful and harmful. This can be an emotional and triggering experience for people in this space, especially folks from historically marginalized identities. So as we discuss, and I'm going to share, which I typically do, my experiences as working in youth development, some strategies I'm going to share, of course, but also coming in this space as a Black man in America who's a husband, who's a father of 3 children who are being raised in the New York public school system, and me myself being raised in a public school system. And what does that mean? How did it impact me and my experiences? I'm going to bring that to this conversation as well. And I hope that you all feel free to do the same. I don't expect to ask you to share without me sharing myself. So I think that's important. Speak from your truth, acknowledge the truth of others as well. Check in instead of checking out. And lastly, expect and accept lack of closure. So sometimes there won't be a resolution right here and there, but there are some seeds that were planted for us to think and reflect on and circle back to and plan around, okay? Any questions? Are we okay with the group norms? Thumbs up? All right, thanks for the snaps. All right, so we're gonna dive into SEL and transformative SEL, which is basically an equity lens. Now, SEL was coined by Castle in 1994. This is an organization that has pioneered this type of work and done the studies and the research behind it for about 20 or so years. And they created a Castle 5 competency model. And this model consists of 5 buckets. We're looking at self-awareness, which is optimistic self-efficacy and labeling your emotions, helping staff and students identify how they're feeling. I know when I work with middle schoolers, you say, how's it going? I'm all right, I'm good, I'm all right. We're helping students develop an emotional vocabulary so we can locate where they are. And they can also, as they can label it, they can work on it. So in helping students develop that and staff as well. Self-management, impulse control, stress management. This is self-regulation methods and strategies to pause, take a break, to discuss, to journal. It's all a part of self-management and looking at it as well through an equity lens. So we're gonna go over that column in a bit. But social awareness is having empathy, respect for others. We're looking at SEL also in relationship skills and learning how to work on a team, learning how to communicate with team members, and also having the ability to ask folks for help. This is an important SEL skill. I just want to just kind of anchor this as well, that SEL isn't just about how you feel. There's a wide range of SEL skills that I think students need to develop and that we need to capture and hone in on to support them. Just to kind of share something here. I was at a middle school that had a very strong concentration on SEL, and they're a middle school, they're actually a K through middle school, and they started a lot of their SEL practices within the classrooms, within all the activities. And what they began to see is students develop themselves emotionally, but also setting goals for themselves and having confidence. So they were able to go to college, because sometimes students are going to college based on their academics, but they're not prepared for it emotionally. You know, they're not prepared for it with their esteem, their confidence. So a lot of these skills will support that. So they're not just going to school, but they're thriving in school atmospheres where they're not accustomed to. You can only imagine students of color going to a space where no one looks like them, no one talks like them. How do they may be able to do well academically, but they don't know how to navigate through those kind of spaces. And SEL can help you anchor that kind of skill and support you along the way. Responsible decision-making, so identifying problems and solving them, and also being able to reflect on them. And looking at it through SEL and equity in terms of self-awareness, it's expressing your identity and also recognizing implicit biases that you may have. This is for students and staff alike. We talk about self-awareness within that bucket. We're going to discuss that within the training. And also self-management is cultural humility, understanding other cultures in the room and being humble and understand that there are other spaces and other cultures you're not really aware of, but you need to honor and respect. Resistance, civic efficacy, also social awareness and looking at empathy and a sense of belonging. Cultural affirmation, which is something we're also going to touch on as well, is do our students feel affirmed when they come into the space? Do they feel valued? Do they feel recognized and acknowledged? Youth agency and youth voice. When it comes to social awareness, are students giving a platform to voice how they're feeling, to be agents of change when it comes to curriculum development, when it comes to advocacy, when it comes to outreach, when it comes to planning? Are they a part of the process? And I'm going to share some strategies around that, and also a video on someone who's doing it well in Cleveland, in Ohio. Relationship skills and collaborative problem solving, multicultural competence, and understanding not just that there are differences, but understanding what the differences are in the room. Students don't come with a blank slate. You know, they don't come with as an empty canvas. They come with their own culture, with their own identities, with their own language, with their own type of way of doing things. And we need to acknowledge that and learn about it. Helping and sharing. And lastly, for responsible decision-making, is making ethical, responsible decisions and disrupting injustice and supporting justice and collective well-being and thinking about the whole collective when it comes to our school team spaces. All right? So
there was a question about, will you share your slides with us?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. There'll be some resources as well.
Great, thank you.
Great question. So we're going to tackle, we can't tackle it all. We only have about an hour and a half to do so, but we're going to tackle recognizing implicit biases and empathy and cultural affirmation youth agency. And then we'll definitely answer some questions around that. But I think that those are some of the key points we need to land on when it comes to lifting up equity with lifting up SEL with equity lens in our school environments. All right, so let me go to the next slide here. All right, so here's the question here. How did we get here in terms of our schooling and how we operate and how schools are structured, and just how students of color are feeling? And we're looking at it, I'm looking at it from a post-Brown versus Board of Ed starting point. Now, to be quite honest with you, we can go even further with slavery, of course, in 1619 and the effects of that, having enslaved Africans feeling that they're 3/5 of a person, they're not human beings, and how that translates to today, where they don't feel like they matter as a human being. We're living within the vestiges of slavery. It's just the bottom line within our culture. It affects every system that we have, justice system, and also the educational system. And this is a point of reference to where things were supposed to change with the Brown versus Board of Ed, where we were dealing with the Plessy versus Ferguson, which was a separate but equal type of right. But then we were fighting for the desegregation of schools because separate was not equal. However, there was some backlash with that. With the institution of Brown versus Board of Ed, students of color were able to start going to mostly white schools. However, when that happened, there was in the 1950s and 60s, there was something called the white flight or the white exodus, which was driven by white rage. And communities not feeling that they can coexist with people of color, not be in the same environment within classrooms, not being taught by people of color as well, and how that impacted communities, they left and they migrated from these urban cities and they moved over to suburban communities. Now, what does that have to do with anything? It has a lot to do with what happened in education, because as soon as Black students started entering into that school system, white families left, and the communities, property values went down and the taxes went down. And what supports our schools are property taxes and our city funding. So because of that, there wasn't a lot of funding going into these schools. So therefore they had less resources, less materials, less supplies, and they weren't able to thrive like they should have. Looking at it now in terms of what's occurring, we have two separate educational systems, those who are within white districts and those who are non-white districts. And the money follows the white districts. We have $2,000 per student as an additional. Now, I know many of you are funders, you know grants, you understand that per the slots and per pupil cost, that if someone gave you an extra $2,000 per student, there's a lot you can do with that. You can reduce classroom sizes. You can renovate spaces. You can go on trips. You can provide up-to-date materials and support. You can provide more tech access with an additional $2,000, which ultimately results in $23 billion racial gap when it comes to white districts and not non-white districts. So this is set up for failure, unfortunately, with the way the system is going, which we need to advocate for education reform. And that's what we're doing as an organization. I'm pretty sure you guys are also doing the same with policy advisors and advocates for change, which is great. But this is the stark reality that we're dealing with. 1957, the African-American teachers were displaced. You can imagine that when Brown versus Board of Ed came into action, all the schools where they were run by Black staff and Black educators, 38,000 educators lost their job. These are just people who were teaching students and had a passion in what they were doing. They just lost their jobs. And they could not work within those white school systems because the families did not want Black educators teaching their kids. So they were without any jobs, so without income, which devastates families, but also it devastates the Black students who felt affirmed when they were being taught by people who looked like them, people who were able to share experiences that they could relate to and familiar with, people who can support them in ways that that only those who are similar to them can address and can adhere to. But looking at the National Center for Educational Statistics, we see that even currently, well, 2012, 2014, only 80% of educators are white compared to 18% educators of color. So this is still happening. We were living in an environment where many of our educators are typically white women, and they bring their experiences with them. And they bring their biases with them as well. They bring their own way of teaching. Sometimes their teaching has the way that they were taught 30 or 40 years ago. And many times that's out of place. Many times that's centered in a Eurocentric mindset and doesn't relate to the student of color that are in their faces. Here's another study. Black teachers, a Black teacher between 3rd and 5th grades reduce a Black student's probability of dropping out by 29%. So having more teachers and educators of color in the pipeline does help. When they see that, it does help students do well, help students thrive by seeing more diversity when it comes to educational spaces. All right. Lastly, on here, 2003, we see a Harvard study that finds that schools were more segregated in the year 2000 than in 1970 when busing for desegregation began. where basically nothing has changed. And it's unfortunate, but nothing really has changed. And this pattern of education, this system that we're up against is against students of color. And we have to advocate for change in order for us to get the right funding and support systems in place for students to thrive. And dealing with SEL on a generic basis is not enough. We have to look at it through an equity lens and see where fairness needs to be implemented, where students have the opportunities that they should have because they're children. So looking at that, I want to just share some more data in racial disparities in school discipline. And I want you to look at this chart here when it comes to suspensions amongst boys and girls. And we see the suspension rates for white boys and black boys. And black boys, we spend 3 times more. This is for the same infraction. This is not black boys are doing worse things, or this is for the same infraction, being suspended 3 times more than white boys. For black girls, they're suspended 6 times more than white girls. Now, this is the stark reality that we're living in. And I want to just ask you a question. Just how does this data make you feel? And why do you think this is happening? So let's start with this. I'm sorry for the typo here. But how does this make you feel when you see these type of reports? And what do you think is happening at this alarming rate of students to be suspended? And I will tell you this, these suspension rates do contribute to what they call as a school to prison pipeline. Many times when students are suspended or expelled frequently, they drop out. The dropout rates increase, and many times it links into prisons being filled with people of color. So we have a chat here. All right, people say, I'm sad, I feel like crap. Me too, feel angry. Feel frustrated. Makes me feel angry, and I think that it is racist. Gotta call it what it is. Confused, frustrated, guilty. Does anyone want to share out? We can feel free to do so as well on what your thoughts are behind this. Girls have the double whammy of racism and sexism against them. Now, what makes you say that? This is from Susan, right? You're muted, I can't hear you. For some reason, you're still muted, I can't hear you. There you go.
Just thinking about even where Black women in general sit, it feels often like at the very bottom. And so teachers are holding girls to this, they're both ignoring girls and wanting to pick at them because that's what we're all taught, right? That there's a pecking order and it's based on race, it's based on gender. We could probably look at statistics about economics as well. So it feels like, we all as adults and children both are finding ways to hold Black girls to the hardest standard.
Right. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else wants to share on this as well? On how you feel and what do you think is happening here?
It's Howard. The part that's hard for me, I was the one that put like crap because for me, it's hard for me to get past the achievements of my ancestors. And you look 30 years later and we haven't made that much progression. And to look back on them and say that we've done our job to progress us forward as a race, we haven't. So that's where I feel like crap comes from, because you really want to like look back at my grandfathers, my grandmothers, my great grandfathers and grandmothers and say, look at what we've accomplished. And, it's hard to look at them and say, we've done something to support you in return for what you've done for us.
About to make me get really emotional right here, Howard. I feel so much the same. It's when you see the advancements our ancestors made and seeing where we are right now, it's just really hard to see this. Anyone wants to share out?
Well, I would like to say something. It's just clear to have clear common sense to know when you're not being treated well. Like you were saying that the Black kids are being treated much differently with suspension, being taught, and all those other things that's going on in their education, to where when I coming to Madison again, not to take us off the subject, was the diversity of people here. And to learn about each culture is such a wonderful gift. To even think of myself putting somebody down because of a color of their skin, there's something that's wrong with me, because my morals and values won't even let me go that far. You know, for me to point at a person because of the color of their skin, to call them uneducated or unworthy of something, it got to be a big part of my ignorance, of uneducation, or just not knowing how to be open with others. Because it's just so simple-minded to think of a person color to keep them down. When I see little Black girls in school today, they're so smart. And to have Black girls, white girls, Chinese girls, or all ethnic girls in one room, and to hear them all laugh and talk and share their ideas, and then to maybe grow up and be into this racial world of teaching, is like a waste of time. So if we stand together with the children as small and teaching them to continue to love each other culture, to learn about each other culture, everything can be a little more easier. But if people are doing these things just to keep their job by keeping oppression on certain colored kids or Black and brown kids, you know, just to keep a job, you know, they need to be pointed out, because this got to stop. This has to stop.
Right. In the book, White Fragility, the author actually states that white supremacy spreads really due to silence. And the more silent we are, the more that it spreads. But the more that we say something that we're seeing, the more we have an opportunity to cause and trigger educational reform. So like you said, this needs to stop it. I totally agree with you. And the more and more we know about this information, the more and more we can share it, and we can speak out about it and cause it to stop, because it's affecting our kids, it's affecting our young kids of color in a startling way. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually transition here and just go over into my personal story. See this dapper young man right there? With the acid wash jeans. Not many people know about those jeans. You have to be part of that time. But if you do know, you know. So this is me as an actual middle schooler. And I loved that jacket too. It had so many buttons on it. It was like my favorite jacket. And this is my experience. And this is I thought I was cool, but apparently it wasn't that cool, unfortunately. And but I came with a story, you know, under those acid wash jeans and that jacket. There was a story behind me, and I want to share that with you. So my background, I'm of Haitian descent. My parents are Haitian, born in Haiti, and I was born here. My brother was born in Haiti. Our house was a very much, you feel like you were in Little Haiti, you know, the food, the dancing, the culture, the music, everything, the language. My parents came here not speaking much English at all. And I grew up in Queens, New York, and I'm going to follow the first bullet point here about feeling culturally ignored. And as a student, you know, in elementary, I was thriving. I got great scores. You know, I was pretty much what they would call the classic nerd. But when middle school hit, I don't know if anyone else can identify with this, but middle school was a whole different animal for me. It was one minute you're just like playing with toys and you're just answering questions in class. The next minute people are assessing how you're dressing, assessing when's your last haircut, you know, making judgments and criticisms around that. And also about my culture. You know, back in the 90s, this is late 80s, early 90s, there weren't a lot of Haitian educators and who were speaking out and supporting the culture. And there was a lot of like misinformation. One was that Haitians are helping spread the HIV virus, the poorest country, the Western Hemisphere. We kept hearing that. There was nothing for me to anchor myself into. And to be quite honest with you, I had myself and my family members who would go to school and we wouldn't even say that we were Haitian. You know, some of my cousins would say, hey, I'm Dominican. And they kind of looked like they were Dominican for what is quote unquote the look like, but it affected us. No one acknowledged us at all. And it was hard to get through as a middle schooler. You feel like you're alone. You feel like no one can identify with you. Your parents would say, hey, go to school and deal with it. But I remember nights and days calling my mom and crying because I just didn't feel like I was valued. I didn't feel like I was important. I didn't feel like people understood me. I didn't feel like anyone cared. You know, that was the unfortunate thing. And students and staff alike. So also my name was a very Frenchy name. You can only imagine Jamaica, Queens is kind of like a, you know, not a wealthy area, but you come in Jamaica, Queens and you're saying my name is Jacques. It wasn't received well. So I changed my name up. I was J-Rock. I was, you know, I was everything under the sun. I was Jack. I changed my name multiple times because I didn't want to identify or explain myself constantly, what my name meant, and say it the right way. And it was just really tough. And I felt socially disengaged. I had a few friends who could identify with me in the strict discipline of our West Indian parents and discussing that. But it was a tough. I would say sixth grade was my toughest year in academia, and I had no support to navigate that through when it came down to middle school. And this was a tough time period in my year, and you can also imagine that my grades plummeted. You know, I came in there thriving, but then socially and emotionally, I just wasn't there, and I was happy with just passing, which was not really me. But this impacted me. This is what the work that we do as well. We're not just looking at students as literacy and math reports and grades. We're looking at them as a whole child. That impacts how they learn, and that impacts how they perform, and it affected me greatly. Now, on the positive side, I remember going to high school and still dealing with the same kind of issues. But it was that one teacher that saw me hiding in class and not really performing well. And it was African studies. It was actually African American history class in high school, which was the first time they ever did it. And he spoke to me, and he acknowledged the history of Haitians and how first Black Republic, first successful slave revolt. I never heard these things before. And it made me feel like someone knew my history and cared about me and acknowledged me in the room. So it actually made me perform better. And I'm not just like making that up. It was really something that triggered me emotionally. It made me feel as if I mattered. It made me feel culturally affirmed and supported my walk throughout high school to the point where I wanted to be a history teacher just because of that experience. I actually went to college and majored in history. So you can see that one impact, that one story, how that can turn around because someone saw me for who I was and wanted to affirm me from where I was as a middle schooler. So what I wanted to do is just kind of share that story, but also just discuss cultural affirmation. And if we can, just think about practices that could have helped me or a student like me who may feel like they don't belong, who may feel out of place, who may not feel affirmed, or recognized, and then let's talk about it within the breakout groups and talk about what affirmation can sound like, what it could look like. I'm gonna give you another example as well. I manage our literacy book clubs, and I would observe them at time to time. And there was a group that I was observing, great tutor, he was doing a great job, and it was about 5 or 6 students. They were all male too. And this school was in Far Rockaway, Queens, and they just had an influx of Nigerian students. And but the school was predominantly African American students, so you couldn't tell the difference in who was, who wasn't. One time we were having a book discussion, and one of the students, who was not Nigerian, he says, "Hey, I got a question for you." He was wanting to pose a question to the Nigerian student, and he says, "Just out of curiosity, do you guys have running water?" And the Nigerian student, like, "What do you mean? Like, did you guys live in houses?" And he was actually asking like real questions. Does you drive cars? He didn't understand, had a concept that what you may see on TV, or what you may see in the news, is not everyone's reality. And thankfully, the tutor was competent enough, multicultural competent enough to say, "Hey, that's not accurate. Actually, there's a lot of wealth in Nigeria. There's a lot of entrepreneurs in Nigeria. There's a lot of history in Nigeria. There's a lot of beaches in Nigeria." And he spoke to it, and it changed the whole narrative in the discussion that was taking place. And I could see that Nigerian student feeling affirmed that someone cared about him to not only speak up and support him, but to actually have the history and understanding of that student culture. So this impacted the book discussion, and it made him feel affirmed and a part of the group. So I just want to kind of put those stories out there. And what I want to do is break out into breakout groups and have you guys discuss this and think of strategies and practices that can help affirm students and discuss what it sounds like and what it looks like in our educational spaces. So Susan, can we set up the breakout groups for that?
Yeah.
We're gonna do it for about 5 minutes, actually, not 10.
Okay,
Just do it for 5.
About how many groups would you like? Or how many people per group?
Can we do about 4 per group?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. All right. Give me a second and I'll do that. And you'll be in your groups in a second. And 5.
Thanks, Nathan.
All right. So it looks like folks are in. I'm going to see if I can join one. And you want me to just give a 1-minute warning in 4 minutes and then close them in about 5?
Yeah, 5 sounds good.
Sounds good. Cool.
Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah. Hey, Nathan.
I think right off the bat, I think it starts with like open communication. And the example that he gave, like that person changed their narrative right then and there in that present moment. So I think it takes like open communication, understanding, not judging, like on both sides, right? Even when he was explaining his position, he wasn't like shaming him for not understanding, how he was uninformed. So just being open and honest and being able to like identify your own weaknesses and your own biases and your own blind spots and adapting in the present moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing for me is that ability to be empathetic and put yourself, or to be vulnerable as well and understanding. I think that that's one of the hardest and also most impactful ways to just interact with another human being is to be willing to be vulnerable to and open-minded and willing to just have uncomfortable situations in some ways. And I think that when you are open, you can also see where your own just implicit bias, your own assumptions will come out versus just, going into any conversation, just kind of, being normal and everyday. So I think that awareness and that empathy is something that with practice will start to come more naturally. But if you're not aware of it, then that's when I think it could even get sort of more exasperated.
Yeah, I've been reading, and I think all of that is like what does it look like? What does it sound like? And that's so like personal to all of us. And right. And I think that sometimes what it sounds like is, I think about in conversation a lot, so much of it, this is so basic, but we always think about like we're listening, but we're like thinking about what we're going to say back. Right. And I think that so much of it, it is truly listening, right? So sometimes like what affirmation looks like is silence, right? Or what does it sound like? Because it's like it's nothing, right? It's not, you said this specific thing. And so much of conversation, there's this like book that I was reading recently that's about, it's about so many different kinds of relationships, like professional, personal, romantic relationships. But so much of conversation is cues towards like for validation, right? And it's to feel like you're really being heard. And so sometimes it's truly just listening. And, sometimes like with my wife or with even at work, sometimes like the most validating situations are not when I'm just like listening to when I'm saying something and then someone listens to me and I can tell that they're listening, but it's when it's not just echoing back or parroting something back, but it's just like, I understand why you feel that, or I can understand why I feel it, or I now understand a little bit more why you could feel that way. So I think it's just, again, sometimes what it sounds like is literally just nothing, right? Because you're genuinely listening. We figure out so much about like, what are we saying back? What are we putting out there? What are we looking like? What are we doing? But sometimes it's literally just like giving people that space to truly sort of like receive that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, just to comment real quick. I mean, like, because at first you said like silence is can be affirming. And at first I was like, I don't necessarily agree with that. But then it's like kind of those nonverbal communications, those like maybe like a head nod, that encouragement, or just kind of sitting in that space and being present and sharing that kind of energy. So nice. That was interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's like silence is different than, exactly, that sort of like flat. And that's something that we're struggling with right now. All of those nonverbal things are so complicated right now with over Zoom and doing things digitally and not being in person. And I think that, and so there's a difference between like engaged silence and unengaged silence. Like silence can also be pretty harmful, right? If like something is happening and you're not saying, you're not affirming. So I just, I feel that, so, there's total nuance to that as well.
I don't necessarily have a good thought process or different answer, but I think what I think about when I hear those prompts of what does affirmation look like, what does it feel like, when I think of all of our institutions and our structures and definitions and how white supremacist they all are, and so like I think of schools as like inherently built upon foundations of white supremacy, of grading systems, and so that's what I think of. Like affirmation would be really uprooting all of that and creating spaces where young people feel loved and valued. I don't have a hugely coherent thought process, but that's where my head goes. Is like all the institutional instructional things that we have that reinforce white supremacy. Yeah, and I gotta go and in the breakout rooms. So see you later.
Hey, Nathan, we got about 1 more minute.
Yep. So just sent a message to folks, so they'll all be ending within a minute. Great so far. Really appreciate it. And it's a good group of folks too. You got some who are cool personalities in the room, which is
You have a great team. I can see that.
Yeah, we do. And good mix of a couple funders, couple school district, couple city, and then a lot of providers, which is good to have.
Yeah, awesome.
Everybody will be back in about 10 seconds, it looks like.
All right.
I think we're all back now, it looks like to me.
Yeah, it just dumped us right back.
Okay, perfect. Glad to have you all back. Welcome back. Thank you, Mary O'Donnell, for sharing that data about the non-Hispanic Black students 9.5 times more likely to be suspended than non-Hispanic white students in 2010, 2011. Thank you for sharing that information. We need to hear that. We need to see that. So just want people to have an opportunity, whoever wants to share out any practices, please feel free to do so among any of our 4 groups.
Please tell me if I'm getting on the mic too much.
Not a problem.
One of the parts that I didn't quite add in with my group that I think is a great opportunity that we have is when we get an opportunity to speak with parents, talk about how much we admire and respect their child and what they have to bring to the room. I think that's always a good way, and let them know that we had this conversation, and let them know that I feel this way, because sometimes when I say it to them amongst their peers, it may be embarrassing and may not be taken the same way, but let them know for sure that when I'm not in this classroom or I'm not with them, I'm still thinking this way about them.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Bringing families in is definitely an important factor into affirming students and families. It's an excellent idea. Thank you for sharing that practice. Anyone else?
So there were several really great points in our group. Alejandra mentioned really creating space for multiple languages to be used and celebrate in learning, whether that's through dual immersion or other kinds of programs. And she also talked very eloquently about transforming the curriculum to not teach American history through a colonized lens. And really, as you were saying, Jacques, bring in Haitian history, bring in other histories that are crucial to understanding how things are today. Allison talked about utilizing inclusive kind of celebrations, like having everyone bring in a dish of food from their family's history and culture, and kind of having something to explain where that comes from as a kind of easy way to learn about others' culture. And then Hugh said even maybe providing resources for families to learn more about their past, whether that's through genealogy or other kinds of things. So I thought those were all really, really great points.
Those are excellent points. Great. Thanks for sharing that, Andrew. All right, one more. It's time for one more. Going once. Okay. So
We
I'm
also
going to share.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
We also talked about spending time in the spaces that the kids are in. So getting into their neighborhoods, like kind of like your tutor story. He spent time trying to figure out about Nigeria. Maybe we don't have that to figure out, but we can go to the communities, the small neighborhoods that kids are living in, get to know those neighborhoods. And we also just talked about all the different kinds of ways kids can express about their culture and being like listening to them and for them.
Yeah.
So art, story, you know, verbal, and just making spaces for those expression of culture to come through, and all kinds of culture, right? Youth culture, you know,
Right. Yeah.
heritage, you know, all different kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having the approach of us going to them is an excellent practice as well. Rather than always waiting for students to come to us, let us revisit them, let us check in on their community as well. They say, study shows that proximity affects perception. And when you're in close proximity, it affects your perception on those students. When you're further away, you really have a different type of lens than you would if you're closer to them and have an idea of what they're going through and have a more of a perspective taking kind of lens to education and your approach to supporting students. So I think that's a great tool and strategy to utilize. So I'm gonna give you some strategies that I've looked at and I've seen out here in New York as well. Number one is really getting to know your students. I think is important. Students are not blank canvases. They come with a story, they come with a culture, they come with an identity. And I think having, not to over survey students, I know that's a lot to do, and it's, sometimes you go through survey fatigue, but just checking in and supporting them and having team building activities to figure out what they're about, what their interests are, where they come from, and learn more about their history and how to support them, I think is very, very important. Next is hear your students' stories. I think this is valuable to the conversations you have in class, is to give them opportunities to share their own stories and what that means to them and how we can value them within that. If you have students who come from different countries or have different linguistic experiences or different cultures, no matter what it is, I think having an opportunity to have students hear, have staff hear these stories could have a different lens and different response to it. It can make more of an affirming environment. Multicultural classroom is, of course, is expected. Having a classroom where they see people who look like them in the actual classroom. They read literature that speaks to them and their experiences, or diverse experiences as well. And I put in adult library because I do think that though we push for students to learn a lot and to be exposed to different types of cultures through literacy and through documentaries and things of that nature, we also need to challenge our adult staff to read books that pertain to having a different type of lens of equity when it comes to the teaching approach and instruction. So I know in my organization, we actually started book clubs around equity, and every month we meet up and we'll discuss different types of books on teaching and teaching with the equity lens, pedagogy of the oppressed, white fragility, Doing More Than to Survive by Ravita Love. There's so many books you can think about that can help your own understanding and keep you abreast to maybe your own biases and help you to maybe motivate you to trigger you to change your practices and to create a more cultural affirming environment. Next is maintaining high academic expectations. So though they may not have a similar culture to you, but always keeping those academic expectations high and supporting them to get there. And learning their names. This is something that may seem very small and very minor, but knowing a student's name and having an effort rather than saying, I'll just call you Jay, I'll just call you, whatever. My son, his name is Judah, and he was going to a school. It was predominantly Asian and white in our area, and there was only 2 Black kids in the classroom, Black boys in the classroom. It was him and his boy named Joshua, and they didn't look anything alike. They didn't look anything alike, but the teacher constantly would confuse the 2 of them, and it would drive my son crazy. It would drive him crazy to the point where, to this day, that is his worst teacher. And it's primarily based on that experience because she never knew who he was, never try to figure it out. You just say, all right, Joshua, Judah, one of y'all come over here. But that's important. That's a part of his identity. We named that for a reason. And I think it's important that educators make sure that they identify this and learn how to pronounce students' names. Any questions about these ideas, strategies? All right. All right, so what we're gonna do is this. We talked for a lot. We're gonna go for a break for about 5 minutes. It was 10 minutes before, but I think we're kind of need to speed this up a little bit. So 5 minutes, and we'll be right back. The time is right now is 12:26. So let's just do 12:32, well, 12:31, and then we'll get back into the next section. We're talking about implicit bias, and then youth agency and youth voice. All right? Sounds good? Come on, Arthur's gonna do it for me, or Howard?
Yeah, I'll go for it. Implicit bias is defined as attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner.
Okay. And just want to hone in on the unconscious manner. So these are not explicit, but implicit biases that deal with stereotypes, and you're unconscious. You're not cognizant of these at times, but they are there, and they need to be acknowledged, and they do affect educational spaces and learning with students of color. So let's talk about that and discuss some common implicit biases. I got this from an article that discusses this in educational spaces, and see how teachers respond to it when it comes to students of color. So teachers assuming that students belonging to a specific identity group are experts on issues impacting that group. That could be a common implicit bias. Just because the student is there, you may feel like, hey, can you tell us the whole monolithic thought behind what your race feels when it comes to this? And that weight, or that being an expert on these topics, is just not fair for students to feel that type of pressure, or to have that kind of understanding or that expectation. Kids need to feel like they're kids. And I feel like there's a lot of weight, especially on students of color, to have all the answers for the entire race and where we are in the plight of it all. Now, next, teachers attributing a certain learning preference or ability to a specific population of students. African American males prefer kinetic learning, and this is learning by way of moving, and you need to move in order to learn. It supports your learning style. Someone referenced this earlier about learning styles as well as part of equitable practice in schools. And Asians are better at math and science than other student groups. So this is also debunked. And African American males don't prefer kinetic learning. From what I understand, students of all cultures and backgrounds prefer visual learning. That's what I've seen for the up-to-date data on that. But we tend to say, hey, let's do this dance, or let's have this hip hop song in order to teach these kids math, or in order to teach these kids a new, be interested in Shakespeare, or whatever it may be. We kind of fall into those stereotypes in order to teach lessons, and we don't know or understand that we're actually exposing our own implicit biases. Next, teachers assuming that comments and questions from certain student populations from certain student populations are meant to be inflammatory. So what does that mean? That means that a certain student could just be asking a question or making a comment, and sometimes the teachers may feel as though from that particular group that it is incendiary, or that it is malicious in intent, trying to stir up drama. So therefore, it could be a simple question, becomes a huge debate or a huge intense conversation because of that implicit bias, that's not what they mean. They're trying to say this, and it triggers something within the student or within that actual teaching staff member. But this happens a lot. I know many studies, or I've heard many stories around Black girls feeling like they're not being heard, or they're asking a question, and it becomes more than what it needs to be, because there are intents or perceived intents behind the questioning or the comment. Lastly, teachers assuming all students of color respond well to tough love. And feel free to chime in if you want to chime in on any of these implicit biases, but this is a very popular one too. I think in many of our charter schools out here in New York City, they have this militaristic kind of approach to discipline and providing tough love, and are very mean to students and very unkind to students. And they feel like that's what they respond best to. And they forget that they are kids once again, and they need not tough love, but just love, and centered around kindness and being supportive. And I think, I remember I was on my path to becoming a teacher, getting my graduate degree in elementary ed. And as I was doing that, I was assisting teachers in Harlem. And I remember, and I used to see some stuff, elementary students. And I remember seeing a third grader get arrested for bad talking to a teacher. It was terrible. And it kind of threw me off from wanting to be a teacher. I was more of a warden. I was more of a security guard than anything else, which was unfortunate. But the perceived notion to handle, especially young men of color, was to be tough with them at all times. And I remember, I'm never gonna forget this, because I am who I am, and I like to smile, I like to laugh, I like to be who I am. And the teachers would tell me, "You're smiling too much. You shouldn't be smiling like that." And there was an actual saying amongst, I don't know if this happens in Wisconsin at all, but the saying I hear in New York is, "Don't smile till Christmas." Is to actually have a grimace type of face and to be stern, because it's better that they respect you in the beginning than you just be nice to them and they disrespect you in the end. So that was the perceived notion. This is not just white faculty, this is Black faculty, this is all diverse groups, and this is how they approach students of color. And these were the implicit biases, and it just didn't respond well. And I didn't change my methods, by the way. I stayed who I was. But any thoughts on that? Any of these things that I mentioned? Do you see them? Do you witness them? Do you think that some of these are true and untrue? What are your thoughts on
that? So I think I had a very similar experience. I was once told, like, "Oh yeah, we were kind of worried about how you do because you seem so nice. And like, how'd you do with the kids? Like, would they respect you?" And I was like, "Do you think that's tight?" I was like, "They don't respect you because you act this way towards them." Like, but I think that in learning, this also ties into how the model minority and how a lot of students who are Asian feel that, like, because people are like, "Oh, well, these are good assumptions people are making about you," but it's still limiting and it's still harmful to them if you expect that they don't need support in different areas, or you expect them to be experts. Either way, you're not seeing them as an individual. And I think that that's important to note too, that it's harmful. Some people have those assumptions and they should be recognized as racism as well. It's not, it's just because you assume something good about someone doesn't mean that that's okay. And I think that, the whole tough love thing, I mean, I understand that some students respond well to that, but I think that you still need to know students on an individual basis. You should always get to know them as an individual and learn what they respond well to, or what their experience has been, and never just assume anything about them. I mean, that seems basic, but it's necessary to explicitly say.
Yes, totally agree. Thank you for sharing that, Alejandra. It seems basic, but it needs to be stated, of course. Anyone else wants to share on any of these implicit biases? Okay, let's go into next. So overcoming implicit bias with empathy. Empathy is the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from within their frame of reference. That is the capacity of, or to place oneself in someone else's position. I like this quote: perspective taking undermines the stereotype processes. And this is from Adam Galinsky. And I think we tend to use empathy, or we should use empathy, to kind of overcome this bias, or this implicit bias approach to teaching. And we're going to go into that. But first, let's go into what actual implicit bias looks like and some common themes that we may see. And these are just triggers or primers that we've been set up to think a certain way, whether it be through, as I said before, social media, news, and we have a certain feeling about a certain look and how we respond to it. So who was the ex-con here? Any thoughts? I think the obvious answer. Yeah, there we go. So, Martha Stewart, of course, was an ex-con. She went to jail for insider trading, right? But you look at this picture of I know we got some old school hip hop heads in here, right? You know, this guy, LL Cool J. So there we go. He looks tough here, but we see this and we think maybe he's the possible ex-con. Maybe he, went to prison for some time. Maybe he's the thug, when in actuality, it is not the reality of what we perceive. And these are some common basic kind of generalities that we go through, or stereotypes that we see, but it does trigger a reaction when you see this. When you see a woman looking like Martha Stewart, how do you respond? You see a young man looking like an LL Cool J, how do you respond to that? What are you expecting from that student based on your own biases? Now I want to go to an actual study, and this is Alessio Avenatti, which is actual scientist in Italy. I don't know if anyone has seen this before. And this was a study based on empathy and pain. What this experiment entailed was someone would actually poke the hand. All you see is the hand and a needle stabbing that side of the hand, or an actual swab hitting the hand. And you would just see the color of the hand. Now, based on that experiment, there were some findings, and one of them was Alessio was seeing that there was a lot of empathy, or it was triggered in the brain when the white hand was punctured by the needle, more so than the black hand. And what he also found was that in reverse, he studied the white Italians and also the black Italians that were there who did the research. They also responded with more empathy, the impulses in their brain, when they saw the black hand being punctured with the needle. And it triggered something in them. But they wouldn't, no empathy or impulses would take place if it was a black person watching a white hand, or a white person watching the black hand. Now, what he was saying was racial prejudices can make us dehumanize members of a different ethnic group. Racial biases weakens our ability to feel someone else's pain. After doing this experiment, he added in a fake hand, with a purple color. And despite the weird hues, when they were poked with needles, the recruits all showed a strong empathetic response, reacting as they would to hands of their own skin tone. So they responded with empathy with the purple hand, more so than they responded with the other person of color when they were prodded or poked by the needle. So in this study, what he saw was that there is a default feeling of empathy for other people. However, this process of empathy is disrupted by racial biases when we encounter that. So He was also stating that white Italians are typically quicker to associate positive words with the term Italian and negative ones with the term African. And the faster they make those connections, the greater the differences in their responses to the stabbed black or white hand. So our responses of empathy are totally impacted, or our feeling of perspective taking or feeling of someone else's pain is affected by racial biases. So when we see another person of color, or see a student that doesn't look like us, or an educator who's teaching, and that affects them feeling someone else's pain, or the effects of whatever racial disparity or any kind of social disparity they're experiencing, for them to move and make and do action to support that student. So this is what the study says. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on it. I don't know if anyone has actually read this before. Okay, but this is a very telling story. Now also, looking at this article, I wanted to share with you guys, and I don't want you to look at the words yet, just kind of look at the pictures. When you look at the pictures, what are your thoughts behind what's going on with these two cases? What's happening with these two cases?
I believe they're both getting through a flood.
Okay. Anyone else? Everyone thinks the same? Thumbs up?
Yeah, yeah.
Carrying their shit to safety.
All right. I would say the same thing. Now, this is actually a picture of two separate situations during Hurricane Katrina. And the Associated Press actually wrote on it in different ways. In the top picture with the African-American male with the black bag, it says here, a young man walks through chest-deep flood water after looting a grocery store in New Orleans on Tuesday. Now, on the bottom picture, how they wrote on this was two residents wade through chest-deep water after finding bread and soda from a local grocery store after Hurricane Katrina. So what you can see as the black dude up on top is just going through a flood and trying to gather up all his valuables. It can be perceived, because of implicit bias, as him actually looting. This was actually seen also in some stories with the recent protests and the rioting, when we see, I remember one situation where there was actually a young white woman, gathering up clothes, and the anchor said that she works there, and it was broken into. And it was obvious she was just grabbing clothes and she was stealing them and looting. But we've replayed this narrative or these stereotypes of when we see people of color or we see white folks and what we expect from them. And this affects our perception, and it affects our practice. Now, what I want to do is share this video. I have to stop and share. It's how to counteract biases. Okay. Let me see. Let me share it first. Can you see the screen at all? Okay, let me just, sorry about that. It's supposed to, here we go. Share this. All right. You see it now, right? Okay, perfect. Now, there's a button to share audio, right? Hoping that this works. Can you hear it?
No.
There's supposed to be like a link to share audio. Do you guys?
If you go to the microphone icon, there's a little arrow, and it'll say select a microphone, and you can say same as system, and
System.
then that should project to your computer one, I think.
Thanks, Alejandro. Let me try that out. Okay.
Think of it as the stereotypes.
I think it just needs to be turned up a little bit.
It's the highest. Take it back. You can at least hear the words, right? A little bit. I'm sorry about that.
Maybe make them a little louder if you can.
I think we're hearing it through your microphone. When you share your screen, there's like a bottom, like in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a little tab that you click that's share computer sound. So you'll have to reshare, and when you click share screen, like another window's going to come up. Click the bottom left-hand.
Ah, I see it. That's what I was looking for. Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
And just wanted to also say, like, I'm loving all of these studies that you're showing us with the empirical data, and it's really, really interesting stuff here. Love it.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Much better?
So implicit bias is a construct that's a little challenging to define. I tend to think of it as the stereotypes and associations that impact how we make decisions on an unconscious level. Implicit bias manifests in several ways, primarily in the different treatment of students and faculty members in different social groups. So usually those social groups are along racial or gender lines. It could be discrepancies in grades and decisions that are made about who's hired to work in the school, or how students are treated, or the outcomes of conduct hearings. So the first scientific intervention is designing for objectivity, and that might look like simply asking students to remove their names from assignments before they're submitted, or asking a colleague to grade your set of assignments and you grade his or hers in return. And what that does is it allows the grader or the teacher to not rely on biases or preconceived notions that they already have of the student. The second intervention is practicing mindfulness. That could look as simple as taking 5 minutes to meditate before facilitating a student conduct meeting. The third intervention is priming with counter-stereotypical exemplars. And that could look like hanging up pictures or stories that represent counter-narratives of people in marginalized groups, like throughout the school. Finally, the fourth intervention is engaging in verbal perspective taking. And that is when we talk about the contributions and the stories of underrepresented groups in our school before we engage in decision-making processes such as admitting students or hiring faculty members. So an action plan has 3 components. The first component is a clearly identified area that is susceptible to implicit bias. The second component is a rationale for the intervention that is going to be used. And the third component is a method of measuring whether or not that intervention was effective. Context and repetition are important. So no intervention is going to work in every single situation, and using an intervention more than once will likely increase the effectiveness of that intervention.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your patience behind that. Any thoughts behind what we just heard?
I thought the technique of removing student names for papers is interesting, it's kind of like the multi layers of bias, and thinking about how so many things that you talked about today and so many things we talk about when we talk about equity is seeing people's full identity and recognizing how their story is connected with who they are. And yet in that with that technique, it's the opposite. It's trying to kind of remove identity, and I understand, and I've done that before in my own teaching, to really just, when you're thinking about evaluation and grading, and that's obviously a whole other conversation, to kind of focus through the lens of, critical thinking and writing skills and all that sort of things. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting that it's sort of like, these dual strategies that in some ways are in opposition, actually potentially working together.
Yeah, I hear you on saying that. I think that it's definitely an intervention that's worth trying out. I think it's somewhat nuanced, but I think it's helpful to test out, because we do come with our own biases, everyone does, and just to check them by having staff or supportive colleagues to help with that process in grading and also removing names. I think those are definitely some pretty good strategies on how to handle implicit biases. But thanks for sharing that. Anyone else?
Just out of curiosity, I have more of a question. How much of a challenge would you see that you've noticed in folks who use action plans but can do it without implicit bias, like meeting a youth and working with a youth and coming up with an action plan? Because I have seen a couple, and some of them were like, I look at the action plan and I was like, this is not even the same kid I know. Like, and as I said, we're more in an after school setting. So I think that may be a little bit different, but to read an action plan and you go, this doesn't reflect the kid that I see. So,
right.
So how do you do that with taking out the implicit bias, or to ensure?
Well, I think all parties needs to be in agreement that there are going to be different perspectives and different experiences, and understanding that comes with this process. But also, I've seen students as well, they respond different from school day and then the after school space. It's just a different type of kid. And I've seen it and I've witnessed it based on the different activities and based on the youth counselors that are there. They respond differently. But understanding that this is something that we have to process and work through. It won't be something we change overnight, but it's going to be, it's going to require us working together and being patient and being flexible and understanding of different perspectives. But we definitely do need different pieces of the puzzle and different parts of the school community working together in order to draft a plan that's reasonable. I'm at time here. I'm sorry about that, Susan and Nathan. But I just want to run quickly with just the last couple of pieces on the slide real quick. My apologies for that. Just really good conversations with you guys. But I wanted just to touch really quickly on this section. Sorry. It's not working properly for some reason, but I'll just go over it myself and just talking with you. The last point was the youth agency and youth voice in creating an environment that's equitable for all students. I do think this is one of the centerpieces in creating that environment is giving students a voice and creating a opportunity for students to not just speak to what's going on with the curriculum, what's going on with the activities, but also being a part of the process of planning. One of the examples that I was giving was creating a student government and a student council. Well, since I'm sharing this slide with you, be able to see the link as well, is that there is a superintendent in Cleveland, Ohio, who actually wrote it into law that students will be a part of the planning process for the district. So there's actual student government that speaks to what will happen, what kind of curriculum they will have, how students will be celebrated and welcomed into the school because students have a seat at the table. And I think in order for students to take ownership of their own education, their own information, they need to have a seat at the table and be trusted with leadership, and also be developed into civic engagement and agency. So that is the another pillar in actually presenting an SEL environment with an equity lens, is providing students with that voice and agency. But I'm going to stop it here. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I want to leave just a couple of minutes or so for questions you may have for me. Susan, Nathan, if you want to add anything here as well, feel free to.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Do you happen to know the title of the Avenanti study?
Yes, you know, it's in my PowerPoint.
Oh, okay, perfect. I can just look
When
at
I
it
give
there.
it to you, yeah, the link will be there, so you can see that
Perfect.
study.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to say earlier, I was so excited to hear that mindfulness on the part of teachers, and then hopefully it would be also with students, elevated to one of the 4 things that the National Association of Independent Schools came up with. That's just, it really points to both how much our mindset, how much our presence really matters to when we're making daily decisions, you know.
Right, right.
Yeah, and then I also just want to say thank you, Jacques. I mean, others should ask questions. And to pitch that, you know, we're going to continue to be talking about SEL, transformative SEL here in Madison. And so your supervisor will probably share with you information about joining a working group that this grant is working on and funding, and making sure that we're valuing your time with a stipend for that work. So it's going to be both educational work, but also like time to come together and pick apart how do we here in Madison see our individual approaches at SEL aligning with each other, and kind of coming up with our best practices and our, you know, common ground language. And hopefully we'll steal some stuff from Jacques.
It's not stealing, it's sharing, so I'm fine
Right.
with that. So is that it? Just wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone who participated. These conversations helped me as well, and any information you shared within the chat was very helpful. I jotted some things down. I hope this is a motivation for you to continue learning in this space. And I hope the strategies and the ideas that I shared with you will be helpful for you with your instruction and also your activities and how you lead them, and being cognizant of having that equity lens as you're implementing SEL frameworks out there. Thank you.
Thank you all. I hope we see each other again soon.
Just want to say thanks. That was really, really excellent. Appreciate. We were actually talking, Susan and I and some others went to the castle, or about 15 folks went to the castle SEL exchange last week or whenever it was. We did a debrief of a half dozen or so people that went in Madison. And one of the things that resonated, we all talked about, was the importance of story. And being able to frame things as it's just a lot easier and better to get information when you have it couched in a story. And so I really appreciate you sharing your story and other stories throughout. Really, I think, resonated with exactly what we were talking about last week. So
Absolutely.
You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Nathan. I think it's something I try to do more in my workshops, is to share personal stories. I know they help me out a lot whenever I hear stories of people who are out there in the field doing the work, and them sharing their experiences. And I also think it helps when you share that you have others share their own stories, which